Welcome everyone to the MAT version 5.8 and the Bonnie version 4.0 training session. I'm Lindsay Wisham and I'm the program manager on the MAT development team. On the line with us today, we also have Luke Osborne, who's the lead software engineer for the Bonnie team. Just a reminder, we are recording this session for future viewing, so we would ask that you please keep your microphone on mute during the presentation and please hold your questions until the question and answer portion of the session. In today's session, we will begin by talking about the updates that were done to the MAT tool that are more behind the scenes and not as easy to see. Then we will get into the demonstration of the new user interface changes in the MAT version 5.8. We will then talk about the schedule for the production release and then open it up for a question and answer session. After that, we will hand the presentation over to the Bonnie team so they can tell you about the updates that were made with Bonnie version 4.0. The MAT had a number of standards-related updates with this new release. For example, the MAT is now using QDM version 5.5. This release included new data types and attributes and removed some that were available in previous versions of the QDM. For more information on the QDM version 5.5, visit the ECQI Resource Center at ecqi.healthit.gov/QDM. As the MAT is now using a newer version of QDM, all included libraries and component measures will also need to be updated to newer versions to be used in your CQL logic. To avoid rework, we recommend that you update your included libraries and component measures first. That way they are up to date and ready to use, which makes it easier to then replace those older versions in the measures when you're working on it for the next annual update. The MAT is also now supporting the clinical quality language Release 1 STU4. For more information on the CQL standard, please visit the HL7 website listed on this slide. The MAT has updated the CQL to ELM translator that is used to validate and format your CQL logic in the MAT to version 1.4.6. More information on this version can be found on the GitHub site listed here. And now we're going to have Dawn walk us through some of the bigger new features in the user interface in the MAT version 5.8.
One of the first changes you're going to notice in the MAT version 5.8 is that when you create a new measure, or when you create a draft of an existing measure, you're going to see a field to enter a CQL library name. This is a change from existing functionality in that the CQL library name used to be created for you based on the measure name. However, with the CQL R1 STU4, there is now a regulation stating that all CQL library names need to be unique within the same namespace. That means that all of the CQL library names contained within the MAT, and that includes CQL library names for measures and for standalone CQL libraries, need to be unique. As this was not a constraint in the previous versions, we may have some instances where you will find that other people have tried to use the same CQL library name. For instance, if there are two organizations who created a measure called diabetes, both of those measures are going to have CQL library names in the MAT of diabetes. This field is going to give you the option to make a change to that CQL library name. The CQL library name still has to follow the same rules that it did in the previous versions of the MAT, meaning it cannot start with a number, it cannot have any special characters other than an underscore, and it cannot contain any spaces. To make a change to your CQL library name, simply make the change in the field and click Save and Continue. You will also notice that in the CQL Workspace General Information section, the field that shows your CQL library name has also been opened up for editing. So you can go ahead and edit that library name here as well. I will give you a disclaimer about CQL library names in that it is always a good idea to keep them concise. These names will become the file name of your CQL file, your ELM file, and your JSON file exports. Because of this, it's important not to have them too long. If these names get too long, you may have problems when generating a zip file or when saving them to certain file paths within your computer, as it may chop the name off. A good rule of thumb is to try to keep them under 200 characters. The next change we've done was to the code section of the CQL workspace. We had a user enhancement request to be able to replace a code that has already been added in the system with a newer version of that code. In order to accomplish that, we have included an edit icon. By clicking the edit icon, it will put the information for that code back into the upper section of the screen. You will need to replace this URL with the most recent version of the URL. As you can see, the version number is included within the URL in order to retrieve a new code. So you would need to go to VSAC, copy a new code, and paste it into the retrieve box, and then click retrieve. What that will do is it will replace the code that you had here with the new one that you've entered. Now you can see for this example, I have put in an entirely new code. So instead of the hydrocortisone dimethicone 360, I now have this hydrocortisone gel in place of it. Since the code descriptor is different than the one that I am replacing, I would need to go change this within my logic in order to avoid any errors. But you can see that when I click apply, it's going to replace the previous one with the one that I just entered. For the next change within the MAT version 5.8, we need to go to the definition section and into the expression builder. This enhancement, again, was a user request, where users wanted to be able to use a relationship within a query. So I'm going to choose Query and click Build. You still have to choose a source. So again, we need a source for our query. I'm going to choose encounter performed and face-to-face interaction. And I do still have to give my source a name or an alias. And then we can continue to relationship. So a relationship is a way to use a second source of data to show a specific correlation between the two sources. So this would be your with and such that statements. So the first thing I need to choose is whether or not I want to do with or without. I'm going to choose with and click Build. That will take me to the relationship screens. Just like the query screens, the relationship screens have a left-hand navigation. So we're going to need to build a related source and then choose the relationship criteria, and then we'll have an option to review that relationship before we continue. So for my related source, I'm again going to do a data element or retrieve, choose my data type, we'll go with a diagnosis, and then I'm going to go with dental caries and click apply. Again, I have the option to add more to this related source if I would like to. I don't need to, but I do need to give it an alias. So this one's going to be diagnosis. And continue to my relationship criteria. The relationship criteria is your such that phrase. So this is how we're relating the two data sources together. So I want to use a timing because I want to know that the diagnosis all the time was during the encounter. So I need to look at an attribute because I need to look at the author date time. So I'm going to build that, and I'm going to use my diagnosis related source. And again, I want that author date time. And I'm going to click apply. Then I need my timing phrase. For the sake of time, I'm going to do a simple during and apply. And then for the right-hand side of my timing expression, I want to know that it was during the relevant period of the encounter. So again, I need an attribute because I want to talk about the encounter and I want that relevant period. There it is. And click apply. Now again, you can see that all of these different aspects of the relationship I have built are here. And another new addition to the MAT version 5.8 is the ability to delete these portions of the logic. So if I decided that I didn't like my left-hand side of this timing, I can delete it and redo it. Or if I didn't like my timing phrase, I could delete that and then choose a new one. I'm going to apply. I can add more. In this case, I'm just going to continue to the review relationship. This gives you one last chance to take a look at the relationship that you built to make sure that it is what you want. If you don't like something in here, you could go back to your relationship criteria. You could remove that timing. You could redo that. You could go back to your related source. You could remove your source and choose a new one. If I click Exit Relationship at this point, I will cancel everything from with on down. And then that will take me back to my query screens. So it'll just get rid of all of this and take me back. Or I can apply and continue with my query. I'm going to click Apply. You can see I now have the whole relationship here. Again, if I don't like it, I can delete it and go back and do another one. But we're going to move on to the filter. So right now I've got an encounter performed with a diagnosis such that the author date time of the diagnosis is during the encounter's relevant period. And then I want to make sure that the encounter's relevant period, so that means I need an attribute, sorry, is during the measurement period, which is a parameter. And apply. Return is also new within the expression builder. This was a part of the phase 2 that was planned. So you can now choose what it is that you would like to return. So in this case, I'm going to return the start of and then I want that encounters relevant period. The sort is still here. That was a feature in 5.7. We're going to leave that as is and move on to the review query. So I can now see the entire query that I've built that has my data source, my relationship, my filter, and my return statement. If I exit query here, I'm going to cancel the whole thing and go back to the initial screen of the expression builder. Since I like it, I'm going to click Apply. It's going to take me back to my initial screen. I've got my query up here. I could add more if I would like to, but in this case, I'm going to click Complete Build, which will put it into my CQL expression builder. I need to give my definition a name and then click Save. Once you click Save, that's when this definition will go through the translator, which will look for errors. I've done a good job, so you can see that my definition was saved without errors. And you can now see that Query Demo is included in my list of definitions. Another change that you may have noticed is that we have renamed some of our editors. The reason we did this is to make it more clear as to what each one of them did. So the CQL expression editor is where you type in your definitions or your functions or your parameters. The CQL library viewer is a read-only editor, and this is here just so that you can look at individual definitions as you're typing your current one. And then we have renamed the View CQL section to now be CQL Library Editor. The reason that we've made this change is that we have now opened this area up for editing. This is what you have heard on calls referred to as the free text editor. Now, at the moment, I still cannot do any editing within this section. The reason for that is when you first log into the Mac version 5.8, the CQL Library Editor is disabled. This is a feature that you have to opt into. The thought behind that was that we may have some users who are not quite as comfortable with CQL to do any editing in this type of long format. And therefore, we wanted to leave it as a read-only area so that they didn't accidentally click in here and make changes that were unwanted to their measure. If you do want to use this feature, you only have to opt into it once. So if you go under your Mat Account tab, we have this new User Preferences box, and you just click the Enable the CQL Library Editor. You will then need to enter your current password and click Save and Continue. Now if I go back to my measure and into the CQL Library Editor, this is now open for editing. And I can simply click in here and type whatever I would like to. Now there are certain areas within the CQL Library Editor that you cannot edit. And that's basically everything above this parameter declaration. So the codes, the value sets, the code systems, the model that the mat is using, and your CQL library name cannot be changed within this editor. So for example, if I were to change this to be QDM version 5.4 and click the Save button, I would get an error message that states that I cannot make changes to that library or to that model declaration. And you can see that the change did not take effect. The reason for this is these items in this top portion of your CQL library file have to be in the absolute correct format and have to be valid in order for your exports to generate correctly. So if you need to change your CQL library name, again, you would go back to the general information section to do that. If you needed to change or delete a value set, you would need to go back to the value set section. And the same thing with the codes and the code systems. What you can edit is all of the logic portions of your measure. So you can see I've got this definition here, and I've used the code that I swapped out in my replace codes demo. So this definition is erroring because it can no longer find this code. So I could just come in here, delete that definition, and click Save. Now if I go back to my definition section, that definition will no longer show in the left-hand side. Additionally, if I were to add a definition, let's go down to the bottom here. I'm just going to paste one in that I've previously written. And click Save. That definition was called Query 1. If I go back to my definition section, you can now see Query 1 is here for me to use. Another way to use this section is to create a brand new measure only using the CQL library editor. So to do that, I would create new measure. I'm going to give it a name. I need to give it a CQL library name. And I'm not going to be able to use special characters other than an underscore there. I'm going to give it an abbreviated name. Select my scoring and my patient-based indicator and click Save and Continue. Just like any other measure, you still need to fill out the measure details section. This is all of the metadata that shows up in that upper portion of your human readable document. That is completely separate from your CQL file, so all of that still needs to be filled out. We would then go to the CQL workspace, and if I wanted to include any of the libraries, let's search. I'm going to click that one, give it an alias. I would do that here in the Include section, just like always. Value sets would need to be included in here. I'm going to go steal some from another measure just to save time. Go. Codes, same thing, you would need to enter them here. The sections you can skip, however, are the parameter, definition, and function section. So we're going to go right to the CQL library editor. So you can see it's pre-populated with my CQL library name, the model, the included library, declaration, the value sets, and I didn't put any codes in, so we don't have those. The default measurement period is still here, and the default SDE definitions are also still here. And then down here, I could go ahead and write any of the definitions that I needed to write within my measure. Let's save. And again, the mat will take this, reverse engineer it back into the individual sections for you. So again, you can see my query is here for you to view. Another feature that we've added into the CQL library viewer that again was a user request was a find and replace feature. So in this instance, when you're in the CQL library editor, if you press Control F, you will get a dialog box for you to enter something to find. So we're going to find all of the instances of SDE, and then I'm going to replace them with supplemental data element. So it's going to start at the first instance highlighted, and I'm going to hit replace, and then it will move on to the next instance. And I can replace and replace and replace. And now it's giving me a red line stating that it can't find any additional instances of SDE. Additionally, we've given you the ability to use the insert icon. So again, you can insert definitions, functions, timing, predefined functions, applied value sets and codes, and attributes. And we've also included all of the shortcut keys here for you to more easily insert things into your CQL logic. And then we have one more big user interface change to show you, and that is on the population workspace. As you are declaring your populations within the population workspace, you will see that we have now moved the save icon below the option selections. We've done this for our users who are using assistive technology in that it creates a better flow for them. It's a lot easier to choose the definition first and then tab down to save rather than having to tab backwards to get to the save icon. So that has been relocated below the options. And that concludes our live demonstration of the changes made to the user interface in the MAT version 5.8. We will now go back to the PowerPoint and take a look at the schedule for the MAT version 5.8 release.
to review the schedule for the MAT 5.8 release. It will be released into the production environment that will occur on the evening of Tuesday, August 27th, 2019. The next day, we will have the release notes posted to the MAT public website, and the updated user guide will be posted that week. These items can be found on the Training and Resources page of the MAT public website, which is emeasuretool.cms.gov. We will now pass the presentation over to Luke Osborne of the Bonnie team.
Hi everyone, my name is Luke Osborne. I'm with the Bonnie team, and today I'm going to be talking over the new features for the Bonnie's next release, which is next Tuesday, Bonnie 4.0, corresponding with the MAT update. So today I'm going to go over what is Bonnie in case anyone is new to Bonnie. I'll cover the updates with the new release, and I'll have some announcements and some time for questions at the end. In case anyone's new to Bonnie, Bonnie is an electronic clinical quality measure testing tool that allows users to use the measures that are exported from the MAT, load them into Bonnie, and then build synthetic test patients using the data elements that are included in the measure definition. And then with those synthetic test patients, users can test the CQL logic as well as the behavior and complexity of the ECQM. For our next release, we have included some new features. We have a custom measurement period. I'll go into more detail in the following slides. We've also added some enhancements to our patient builder, including additional timing attributes for the data elements, as well as some enhancements to the attribute view. And then we've also, like the MAT, updated Bonnie to support QDM 5.5 and CQL 1.4. So the first feature I'll talk about is the custom measurement period. This was a user-requested feature earlier this year, and it came about because currently Bonnie ties all measures to the measurement period 2012, which is a leap year. So there was a use case where someone wanted to test a non-leap year. So we implemented this feature. It allows you to change the measurement period associated with a measure. On the measure details page, there is a small button in the top right that indicates the current measurement period, and then clicking this button will go bring up the change measurement period dialog, which also shows the current year, and then it allows users to input the new year they would like to shift to. Users can select any year that's a valid CQL year, which is from 1 to 9,999, and you can go forward or backwards. And then there's also an option to shift the dates in the patient data as well. If that option is selected, then any date or date time field associated with the patient data will be shifted by the corresponding number of years that the measurement period is shifted by. So for example, if your patient has a birth date, a birth year of 1980, and you shift the measurement period by 8 years, then their new birth date would be 1988. There is the edge case of the leap year for February 29th. If you go from a leap year to a non-leap year, we just change any February 29th into February 28th. So if you need to go backwards from that, you'll need to manually change it back to February 29th. Another update we made was to the patient builder view. The data elements on the left represents what current Bonnie 3.2 looks like, and then on the right is going to be the updated view. So you can see at the top there are additional timing attributes available. As well, there are checkboxes next to all of them that allows users to say that that is undefined. Previously, only the stop of the relevant period was able to be undefined, but now any of them are. In addition to that, the code section below is roughly the same, but underneath that there's now an attribute section which replaces the old results, field value, and references section, kind of combining them all into one dynamic attribute section, which I'll go into more detail. First, you can select which type of attribute you would like to add to the patient data element. And so in this case, we have selected performer, and performer can be one of 4 different types. These are the new QDM 5.5 entity types: patient entity, care partner, practitioner, or organization. So Bonnie knows that performer has to be one of those 4. It gives you those 4 options. Let's say you select care partner. Now Bonnie knows that a care partner a value. So it shows only the relevant views and does not display any irrelevant views when you're building the data elements. Some attributes also have a dynamic field, for example, result. If you select components, it will display a result as an option, and then if you select the result dropdown, it will let you choose what type of result you want. Say you want a date time or a code. In this case, we've chosen quantity, and quantity allows you to input a value and a unit. So all of this is built dynamically based on your selection, and it will change if you make a different selection. Hopefully, this makes the experience of inputting this data into Bonnie easier for the user. As I mentioned earlier, Bonnie has been updated to support QDM 5.5, which means we've added support for the entity types, and it's been updated to support SQL 1.4 as well. So two other changes associated with QDM 5.5 are diagnosis has been changed. So diagnoses is now a list of components instead of a list of codes. And then principal diagnosis is no longer part of QDM, and it's represented by a diagnosis with rank 1. And rank is a new field on diagnosis. So we've shown this slide for a while now. This slide talks about the retirement of QDM logic-based Bonnie, which happened June of this year. So now we're in the final stage. Next week, we'll be releasing Bonnie 4.0 to bonnie.healthit.gov, which is the production server. And then we'll be deploying what's currently on bonnie.healthit.gov to bonnie-prior.healthit.gov. So that means on Tuesday next week, bonnie-prior.healthit.gov will be retired. If you have an account on bonnie-prior.healthit.gov, you'll still be able to access your account, but it will be using the previous version of Bonnie 3.2. So the Bonnie 4.0 release will be next Tuesday. Bonnie will be unavailable all day Tuesday, and then you'll be able to log into your accounts again first thing on Wednesday, August 28th in the morning. For any questions or issues you have with Bonnie, you can use our JIRA for opening a ticket or asking a question. You can also email us directly using bonniefeedbacklist@miter.org. And if you're interested, all of our source code is open source on GitHub, and you can access it using this link.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. Any other questions for the Matt or Bonnie teams? We'll open it up one more time before we adjourn for the day. Okay, well, thank you for attending today's training session. Have a great rest of your day.